Hello everyone, welcome to Analog IAS current affair analysis for 17th September 2020, and these are the couple of articles that we'll be talking about today. The first article is taken from the Hindu and it is titled To the Brink and Back in Ladakh. So if you have to understand the 2017 Doklam face-off or the present Galwan face-off, you have to look at the Chinese supreme leader Mao Zedong's five finger strategy, and the right hand palm and the five finger strategy is the complete picture that we can attribute to this actions by the Chinese government. So let us try to understand what this five finger policy is all about. So according to the theory, Mao Zedong considered Tibet as the right hand palm of China. So what is this right hand palm? So the Chinese always had a vision of being an imperialistic power, and this five finger policy is a culmination of the history that Chinese had and their dream of uniting the entire world under this Chinese civilization. So the five finger policy goes something like this. Tibet is on the right hand side of China, so it is considered the right hand palm, and there are five fingers which China wishes to liberate from the clutches of foreign powers. In this case, that foreign power is India. So whether it is Ladakh, whether it is Sikkim, whether it is the Northeast Frontier Agency, or what we today know as Arunachal Pradesh, all this were a part of the five finger strategy that we are talking about now. Apart from this, other international entities that we have to take into consideration include Nepal as well as Bhutan. So the Doklam face-off that you see in the present situation is a part of this strategy. Now, as far as Nepal is considered, China is following the traditional path of checkbook diplomacy, that is buying out Nepal by investing a lot of money in Nepal, and eventually they will be under a huge debt. So that is the strategy followed. So this is the five finger policy broad outline. So what are the implications of this? Naturally, there will be aggression on all these frontiers and India has to be ready to counter them. So if we go back into our history and take a look at what we have done, we have to understand what did India do to counter them. So it involves various steps. We have taken various strategic steps to counter China across the history. So the first step that we'll be talking about is the creation of the Indian Frontier Administrative Service. This is done to overlook Arunachal Pradesh, or previously it was called as NEFA, or the Northeast Frontier Agency. So this area and other border areas were taken care by this IFAS, that is Indian Frontier Administrative Service, which was there in service till 1968. So this was the first step taken by India to counter China in this region. Later, the forces of this IFAS were transferred to the Border Road Organization and the Indian Army. In containing the incursions in the Sikkim region, what we have done is, first we have made them a protectorate state in 1950, and in 1975 Sikkim joined India after it got its safeguard. Now thirdly, when we are talking about Bhutan and Nepal, we have signed treaties with them. So these treaties are pretty old and have not been negotiated to suit the present needs in the case of Nepal. However, India has negotiated a peace treaty with Bhutan in 2007. The change is that India promised that it would not intervene in Bhutan's foreign policy. This change was brought in 2007. Previously, there was a treaty with Bhutan that India will help Bhutan in designing its foreign policy. Now we gave them complete independence. Hence, China never touched Bhutan, but now they are using Nepal as a pawn because of the fracture that we have witnessed ever since the 2015 Nepal earthquake and whatever has followed. Despite the humanitarian relief that India has given to Nepal, we have also blocked them, and Nepal being a landlocked country, the blockade order issued by India has blocked the supply of goods and services into Nepal in that region because of the Madheshi conflict and other internal conflicts which were impacting India. So ever since, Nepal has been taking a pro-China stance, even though not explicitly, but at times it is clearly inclined towards China. So this clears the air on the five fingers. Now let us have a look at what is India's strategy as far as this right hand palm is concerned, that is Tibet. Let's go into the details of the history and our relationship with Tibet. In March 1959, there was an uprising in Tibet. This is because of the hatred towards Chinese rule. So, in this year, Dalai Lama and thousands of his followers who were religious, and China had a policy of being non religious. The communist state of China opposed all kinds of religion. So, Dalai Lama and thousands of his followers took refuge in our country. The Chinese were ensuring that Tibet is a part of China and they were hell bent on it. But Tibetans, including Dalai Lama, was not keen on integrating themselves with the Chinese civilization, and they sought Indian support for ensuring that they remain independent. So independence was what they want always since 1959. However, if we have to talk about India's official stance, there is no document as far as Tibet is concerned. So recently, there have been signs indicating that India will, in fact, support this Tibet independence movement, because recently there have been signs from the army where our officials have attended the funeral of a personnel in Tibetan forces who would be guarding that area. So the recent Galwan face-off and the border skirmishes in Ladakh is because of the activity of the Border Road Organization in this region. So there is one place called Darbuk Shok Daulat Beg Oldi Road. This is a road which connects Leh to Karakoram Pass, and India also maintains a key landing strip at a height of 16,000 feet. This is one of the highest points, and connectivity to this region is very important for our own strategic safety. Despite the fact that the Chinese side had been building a lot of roads in this region, the fact that India is also doing that has caused an uneasiness on the Chinese side, and they started attacking us. In 1993 and 1996, we have signed two agreements which concluded that both sides will reduce or limit their military forces within the mutually agreed geographical zones. So what is the issue? The issue is that time and again, because of the motivation from this five finger policy, China has been changing the maps frequently and claiming the parts that were in the part of Indian territory as their own. This is causing the problem. And we were holding security talks with the army officials as well as the government officials, yet we haven't reached a sort of a conclusion. Now the fact is, even if we arrive at a fresh boundary agreement as discussed in this article, what can be the implications? This new agreement is not a new path that Indian government has taken. Time and again we have been making new agreements, but the reality remains that we have to ramp up our infrastructure. Like John F. Kennedy once said, the only way and the unfortunate way in which we can attain peace is by getting ready for a war. Therefore, taking cue from the wisdom of John F. Kennedy, we have to ensure that our border infrastructure is in place to contain any such eventuality. Ironically, the only way we can ensure peace is through war. That is the gist of this article. The second article for the day is about agricultural reforms, the kind of reforms which are hailed as the 1991 movement for agriculture, because it is liberating agriculture. So it should be a good news for the farmers. But the fact is they are not happy with this, and they have certain concerns which need to be addressed by the government. So in this article titled "In Three Ordinances, the Provisions That Bother Protesting Farmers," we will be looking at the ordinances that are brought out by the government and what are the issues that farmers are raising. So major farmer groups resisted this government's plan to free up the country's agricultural sector. There were 3 ordinances which were brought out calling for liberalization of agriculture, and there were protests when the government tabled them in Lok Sabha for passing the act. So the major farmer groups are showing their dissent against these new measures which were aimed at freeing up farm sector. The first one that they have an issue with is guaranteeing a legal framework for pre-agreed prices, that is contract farming, and laying down a new architecture for contract farming. This is considered a good sign by many economists, but farmers feel that they will be exploited by the corporates. So opposition parties have lent support to the farmer groups, saying that the plan to stall the ordinances in parliament will be done, and this will be done by attempting to have them sent to a parliamentary select committee. So an ordinance is a provision to enforce a law when parliament is not in session. Now, since parliament is in session, they wanted to pass a law, but the opposition wants to send it to a parliamentary select committee to study it. Now, farmers are already protesting these ordinances in many states like Haryana, Punjab, etc. The major concern that they have is government will be taking away MSP, their only support mechanism they have right now. So this is a sort of a legal right according to them, and if that is not ensured, the free market will exploit the farmers. So the All India Kisan Sangharsh Coordination Committee, which is a front with nearly 200 farmer groups, decided to take out a protest. The Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh affiliated Bharatiya Kisan Sangh, that is, we generally believe that RSS is associated with BJP and it will support every activity of the government. But in this case, even the Bharatiya Kisan Sangh is also unhappy with the ordinance. It demanded safeguards for the farming community, and the left wing that we have in our polity, that is the All India Kisan Sabha, also slammed the ordinances as being in favor of corporates and being anti-farmer. The first ordinance that was passed was Farmer Produce Trade and Commerce Ordinance 2020, and this is now placed in the parliament to make it a bill. The second ordinance was called Agreement on Price Assurance Ordinance 2020, and the third one is about Essential Commodities Act Ordinance, which will now be a bill again, and it will replace the existing act of essential commodities. So farmers are protesting against all this. However, they are more concerned about the provisions as it is in the first ordinance. They are worried that corporates will take over and they wouldn't be getting the minimum support price, as already explained. In this context, we have to understand certain terms like trade area, trader, dispute resolution and market fee, which are a cause of concern in the first ordinance. And if we understand that, we'll be able to understand the concerns raised by these farmers. So whenever we talk about trade area with respect to agricultural produce, the existing infrastructure is agricultural mandis, that is recognized under respective APMC acts of the states. Now these areas which were traditionally considered to be a part of the definition of trade area, say for example private market yards, private market subyards, direct marketing collection centers, etc., they are not recognized here. So unless and until the government actually creates certain infrastructure, how can the farmers sell their produce? And if there is no legal backing, obviously there will be exploitation from the farmers. So the definition of this trade area includes certain places like farm gates, factory premises, warehouses, silos, cold storages, etc. Even though this is a good sign, even though if it includes the definition of farm gate, that is the place at which farm is itself treated as a procurement center, but how many farmers will actually have traders visiting their own farms and procuring the product directly from them? That is on paper a wishful thinking, but in reality the farmers have to bear the transportation cost and go to the agricultural trade center. usually it is the APMC, and in the absence of the recognition to APMC mandis or private market yards, they will have to be going to the corporate warehouses which might exploit them. There is no legal safeguard. That is the first issue. And the second aspect of this protest, the farmers are worried about the definition of trader as per the ordinance. So this law is treating any person who can be having a financial wherewithal to bear the cost of this trade can be given the status of a trader. Now, without any backing from the government, what is the kind of trust that this person will honor the contract? If it were APMCs, they had a sort of a informal contract because they knew the person who would be staying in that locality. That is the informal accountability that they had. Now this trader can be any person. Say if he is from Gujarat, he can trade from a local area in Tamil Nadu as well. So what is the guarantee that the farmers can gain the trust of this trader? What is the formal mechanism? It is not clearly defined in the law, and farmers are demanding that accountability. Third one is the market fee. Now to sell their produce, farmers are expected to pay some market fee. In the previous APMC acts, no such market fee was levied on the farmers, and most of the states exempted them from this market fee. So on paper, though all these ideas sound very good, and to be very frank, these ideas will actually empower the farmers. But again, the concerns raised by farmers are very legitimate because a law can be as successful as its implementation. Now the government, what it can do is, on a pilot basis, it can start the ideas in rich states like Haryana and Punjab, which have been the face of these protests against the government. They have a fear that MSP regime would eventually be taken away and this would reduce their incomes. So what can the government do in these areas? It can ensure that the contract enforcement is fair, and it can hold the hands of farmers to shift from the original system that we have right now to the new paradigm. This paradigm shift will require some sort of support from the government. Otherwise, there is every chance that these traders, who are often very rich, can indulge in profit making, leaving the farmers in a state of deprived conditions. So this exploitation should not happen, and the spirit of the law is to ensure that more money is put in the hands of farmers. Farmers should get the price that is relevant to the context, and the dream of doubling farmers' income should be recalibrated. Of course, the previous goal was to achieve it by 2022, and with the current pandemic, that looks like a distant possibility. But we should have a target in our mind and move towards that goal. And the government has every responsibility to address all these concerns. That is the gist of this article.